Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hey everyone, welcome back to Right on Track. I'm thrilled to be joined by a very special guest today. Please welcome Chase Mitchell. Hey Chase.
What's going on?
Everything's going great here in Pittsburgh. How are things for you?
Oh man, I'm just thrilled to be here, and I'm kind of jealous that you're in Pittsburgh because I got a lot of family up there, and I'm a huge Steelers fan. So go Steelers!
Go Steelers! Well, I'm so excited you're joining me today. We're going to chat all about your new music, your journey as an artist so far, and much more. But before we dive into specifics, can you share with the listeners a little about yourself and how you got started in music?
Yeah, so let's see here. I got my journey is it's a long one. I'm 32. I will be 33 this December. But I got started in music when I was 9 years old. I was 9 turning 10, and I got signed to my first record deal and management contract, the whole nine, by Maurice Starr, who was he's a big boy band, 80s boy band mega manager. He founded New Kids on the Block, Menudo, New Edition. So some of the more iconic early boy bands he had founded. And so when he wanted to cast me to be a part of one of his groups in the early 2000s, it was like a no-brainer. And so that kind of got me thrusted right into the music industry at a really young age, into a boy band called Lucky. There was 3 of us. It was myself, the youngest, at 9, and then Justin Guzman, who was 18, and then Tim Brantley, I think at the time was like 20 or 21. And shout out to Justin and Tim. They're big brothers of mine, still are to this day. But yeah, we were together for about 4 years, give or take. We did a lot of stuff with Radio Disney when they were first trying to promote Disney's new radio channel, essentially. There in the early 2000s, they had launched Radio Disney, but it was an AM channel, I believe, at the time. Definitely wasn't a satellite channel or anything like that. None of that had existed. And we were really blessed with a lot of opportunity to open for some humongous 2000s like pop artists such as like Outkast, Destiny's Child, Lil Romeo, Vitamin C, Sammy. There was a lot of different artists we opened up for throughout the few years we were together as a group. But eventually, as kind of, certain things just happened. And I think we all were kind of going through just a little bit of growing pains and wanted to kind of test the waters creatively elsewhere. And so we kind of all agreed to kind of go our separate ways creatively. And so me being like 13-ish, 14 at the time when the group had fallen apart, I was like, you know what, I'm going to try to go back to school and just be like a normal kid. But that was short-lived. I was in school for about a year, my 8th grade year, and basically had nothing in common with any of my fellow classmates, being that I had kind of lived on the road for a few years and had seen a lot of stuff. And I knew early on like what my purpose in life was going to be. So it was kind of like a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because I knew, and a curse because I wasn't really actively doing it at the time. So I made a commitment to my parents if they were to kind of take the leap of faith and homeschool me so that I could kind of get back into music somehow, that I would promise to keep up with my grades, my studies, all that kind of stuff. And so they did. They granted me my blessing to kind of do that. And so we had made a couple connections in Nashville. I'd opened up for Mark Wills, which he was, to me, he's still an icon. He represents such a huge portion of 90s country music. But we had opened up for him, so we had kept his contact. We hit him up, and he was kind enough to kind of give us a few other contacts in Nashville. But we quickly learned that Nashville doesn't really work just off of having contacts, kind of like maybe LA or New York does. Nashville is more of a you got to be here kind of town. You got to put in the work. You got to make the relationships, and you've got to be willing to kind of hit the pavement for several years. And so that's what we kind of started doing. I would make the weekly trip up from Atlanta with my mom, and she would drop me off on one end. Are you familiar at all with kind of Music Row, Nashville? So there's like 3. So the listeners, if they're not familiar, there's 3 streets essentially off of Demonbreun in Nashville that represent pretty much like 100% of the country music industry. It's where all the publishing houses, the labels, the managers, the agencies, all all the big wigs in the industry make up basically 3 city blocks or 3 streets, if you will, of the music industry. And so I would start on one side around breakfast time with my little briefcase, and I would just start walking until, I got all 3 streets down come lunchtime, and I would just pass out showcase invites or demos or bios or headshots, whatever it was. And I did that for, oh my gosh, probably almost 3 years before we really met anyone that could really help or knew anyone or had opportunity for me. But nevertheless, over those few years, I would still do monthly showcases, and the people that would show up were typically those that were there for the free food and drinks, which I got nothing against that looking back at it, because had I not had those people there, I would have been playing to just like nobody. So it all served a purpose. And so we ended up being really lucky a few years down the road, sticking to the grindstone and kind of pound the pavement. And I ended up getting signed by Buddy Lee Attractions, which at the time they're no longer, they sold and kind of went a different direction. But Tony Conway, the president of Buddy Lee, is who signed me. And he found Garth Brooks. He worked with George Strait, Willie Nelson, Blake Shelton, Miranda Lambert. He helped Jason Aldean get into break out, at the beginning of his career. And he's worked with everyone. And so the fact that he chose to work with me was kind of like this, like, whoa, like maybe I do have a shot at doing this. Like, he's no dummy. But he did tell me early on, he said, Chase, this isn't going to be one of those things where things just happen quickly. They could. There's always that magic, of the business, but a lot of the times it's just good old hard work and keeping the faith. And so that's what we did. We kind of made a game plan where I would go out on the road for dozens and dozens, sometimes as much as 100 shows a year. And I did that with the agency for several years, from the time I got signed to them when I was like 15, 16 years old. And I was with them until about 21. And I kind of just took a step back. They were going a certain direction. They were selling Buddy Lee as well. Tony ended up starting his own company called CEG, which I'm with today. Tony's my manager still to this day. He's no longer my booking agent, but he manages all my affairs, and super blessed and humbled to still be working with him. He manages Alabama and Randy Travis. So he's got some heavy hitters. So when he's helping me, it's not lost on me that, there's something not being done essentially for Alabama or Randy Travis, which is just humbling. But yeah, so that's kind of like the long and short of that side of things, from where I started to where I'm at now. And I guess we can kind of here in a minute talk about some of this new music that we got going on with Danny Rader.
For sure. Such a great story. I think it's so interesting how you started from such a young age with a group. So you didn't start as a solo act at first. So, like, how was that for you being so young and being kind of thrown into a group and having to tour and do basically these big music events as a child, essentially? How was that for you?
I felt like, looking back at it, now that I'm a father, I've got 2 little girls. So like looking back at it, it is kind of crazy, some of the environments and situations that I was in so young. But in the moment and how I dealt with it, and my parents just really trusted me a whole lot, which hats off to them, because honestly, in this day and age, I don't know if I could even do the same thing. But yeah, I mean, I handled it pretty well, I think. But I always was told by the other members of the band, hey, dude, like, you're kind of like I'd never looked at it this way, but they did. And so they were like, you are what some of these young girls are showing up to see. And the record company is very much so promoting you as kind of like the lead dude, and we're kind of like your support. And I always hated when they would talk about it like that, just because to me, as that young age, those were like my older brothers in a sense, and so like I didn't like the way that I had no pride in it in that sense, or ego. I wasn't old enough to really know how to have that. And so essentially when they were like, look, dude, let's do our own thing. We love you and we'll continue to write with you and do all these things, but you need to go and experience and chase this dream, pun intended, as a solo artist, because we think that you're only kind of robbing yourself of really what your career could be if you just took a leap of faith and did your own thing. And so they were always super, super supportive. I know it kind of broke my little kid heart because I felt like I was, having to be pulled away from two dudes I loved dearly. And but it was all for the better. And so sometimes you just got to go through those growing pains and kind of jump into the unknown.
For sure. I think it's so incredible that you had such a great support from them and your family because not everybody has that. And there's so many
Right.
stories of young artists and actors, people who have those childhood experiences that don't go well and that kind of can contribute to how they are later in life. But it's so incredible that you had a great experience that set you up for greater success as a solo artist.
Absolutely. I feel extremely, extremely blessed to have had all the support and all the love along the way. That's not to say it didn't come though with ups and downs and some dark moments, because when you're that young and you've been doing something for so long and the expectations are always set so high, it's really hard. That much is hard to deal with just internally, just as a overall uh, kid, if you will. It is hard to know how to manage those expectations without it kind of weighing you down at times. So it did come with some little struggle, but I'm just glad we ended up where we did, and there wasn't any like crazy front page Nickelodeon breakdown story.
Well, I'm so excited to dive into your current music that you've been working on. And your whole album is coming next year, you said, but your latest single, Back Road, just released not too long ago. So, can you share the inspiration behind this song and why you chose this as a single off the album?
Well, so that's a great question. So basically, Backroad, more or less, is Danny and I. Danny Rader, he's like my new big brother. Love that man. He's amazing. He's co-written and co-produced all these songs with me off of my upcoming album, and also Backroad. We had went in kind of with this mission because we did a lot of this music kind of on the backside of the pandemic and the world kind of starting to open up a little bit, and even some of it right in the middle. And we kind of started noticing a theme where you got all these people in these big cities that were like making mass exits to where they grew up, right? A lot of times small towns. And that would end up forcing them to start rekindling old relationships or broken relationships, or maybe it was lost love or a lost friend or something. And we thought there was something to that. And then as we started peeling back those layers, we also started realizing that a lot of people fall in love for the first time, or maybe the 100th time, or they've lost love for the first time, or the 100th time. A lot of times in a very common, simple place. It's not like some Eiffel Tower in Paris or some New York City penthouse. A lot of times, especially for a lot of country music fans, it's just a back road. Maybe it's in a cornfield or a riverbank sipping some homemade wine. It seems to be more relatable. And we thought we would try to take those two kind of worlds of wanting to rekindle old relationships, but also losing love and finding love all in a real simple place, and kind of combining that. And we thought we kind of nailed it on the head with Backroads.
I love that. And it definitely comes out in the lyrics. I think that the storytelling and the way that you captured the concept you just described, you did it in such a unique way. And I think your song is absolutely incredible. Congratulations on the
Thank
release.
you.
Yeah, for
Thank you.
sure.
We found out last week we were number 2 on Taste of Country and number 6 on CMT, which is wild because
Woo!
I'm all independent for the most part. So yeah, no big record company pushing us.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. So yeah, like being an independent artist, like there are definitely challenges with that. So like as that side of things, what do you think is the biggest lesson that you've learned to stay true to yourself as an artist while also trying to push yourself into the industry?
I think there's two facets to it. I think you have to set really big goals. If you're going to be independent and you're going to go for it, I think you have to make an agreement with yourself early on. That's kind of split in two, which is you got to manage your expectations while setting your goals extremely high. Um, because if you're not setting your goals high and you're not trying to strive for a lot, then you really won't get anywhere. But at the same time, if you have your expectations set on like, oh, I'm gonna be number one, and then you're not, then you get hurt and you get discouraged. So managing your expectations while also setting your goals high is really, really big. But also the other flip side to that is you got to also be willing to put in the work and not expect others to just do everything for you. There's kind of this like blessing and a curse that happens when you do get picked up by some big companies or record companies along the way. And that is you do have a lot of help, but at the same time, you're expecting a lot of people to do a lot for you. And that's not the case these days. You know, a lot of the times the record companies or the successful independent artists, they are realizing that the artist has to basically have the vision, the execution, and the work ethic, or else it just won't happen. It's too fast paced, this world these days, with all everything online and streaming, and there's every single person on planet Earth with a Wi-Fi connection and a smart device has the ability essentially to be an artist or even that a recording artist. So there's so much noise that you got to break through and disrupt. And so, yeah, I think a lot of artists that think that they're going to make a lot of music, but a lot of people are going to have to do the work for them, sadly are going to be let down a little bit. So it's kind of a blend of those three things.
I love that. I completely agree with everything you said, especially the part about you basically need to take control of your own destiny and you can't sit around and wait for people to do things for you. I like have always put myself, my career, everything first, and I like it's exhausting, and I don't think people realize how exhausting it is to be an independent artist, because even if you have management or publicists or you're working with a producer, all these people, they're on your team, but at the center of that is you. You're the one
Right.
holding it all together. You're the glue for your career, and I completely agree that you need to put in the work for yourself and not rely on other people. And I really like your point earlier about having big goals, but like managing your expectations. I think that's a really great perspective because something that held me back a while before I really dove into my songwriting was fearing that I'd fail. And I think I just had such high expectations for myself when I knew things took time and I had to be patient. But I would just think to myself, well, if I put the song out and it doesn't do well, if I do this and it, nothing happens, then I'm a failure, which isn't true. You just have to keep pushing through that. And so I've tried to like always remember that I love music, I love writing, and I love recording. I love putting my music out there, and that's like what matters. And the rest is out of my control. Like I
Exactly.
can I can do as much as possible to put myself out there, but believing in myself and being happy with what I'm doing is the most important. And there are some times where I felt like if I was putting too much pressure on myself, I started to lose my enjoyment for what I was doing, which was not a good thing. So just
Oh,
going back to the
100%.
place of like believing in yourself and just being happy with your music, and then the rest will come after.
Well, 100%. I identify with that a lot. I had to step away essentially around about 21 ish. I took a solid 6, 7 ish, almost 8 year break, which seemed like an eternity because of the exact same thing. Had basically started to hate the one thing that I loved most in life. And it was because I hadn't quite figured out how to do that, managing my expectations, but setting my goals high kind of thing. I just kept shooting for the stars. And if I didn't grab one, then it was like I failed on that mission. And that's not the case whatsoever. So when I came back to music, one of the things that I started doing was I would literally write out, like, what do I want most? And I'd list that out. And then I go, but what would make me happy if? And so I started kind of weighing it out and go, okay, I would love to do, just let's be an example, 100 shows a year, getting paid X and this, that, and the third. But if I could only just do this, that, and I could pay my rent with doing a few shows or, have people show up and maybe they buy a few CDs, like all these kind of managing of that. And you'll find often it's the lesser that makes you happy. If you're able to do what you love, right? You don't necessarily have to take over the world doing it. That may be what you want, but if you're able to do what you love, then you kind of have to redefine the success side of things, and that's what I did going back into it, and also made it a point to because I was just a little bit wiser, a little bit older in a sense. I've been doing it basically half of my whole entire life, if not more. Um, I realized I can't just get back into music and start putting music out or trying to be successful in music if it's just about kind of really I don't know how to put it, but like selfish motives in a sense,
Mhm.
or like self glory things. It had to be about something bigger this time, or else I just knew it wouldn't be able to sustain some of the ups and downs. And now that I have two kids, and they're kind of like the loves of my life, along with my wife, and I realized that the mission had to be bigger. So that's why I started running with this mantra of mine: chase your purpose, because my purpose is music, but at the same time, my purpose is not necessarily derived around the stats of it. It's more so about bringing a message of just do what you love. And whether it's painting or whether it's uh, being an accountant, I know people that love crunching numbers, like they literally live for it. It's like all the various ways that people can find themselves having purpose in this life. If you are in the midst of that and you're in tune with what that is to your life and you're doing it, then you're a success. You're winning, because there's a lot of people every day that go do something they don't want to do, and they're slowly dying a little bit every day inside. And they might be super successful on paper, but they're just dying inside. That is not success in my eyes. And so the message of that became something I felt like I could promote for the rest of my life, regardless if I sell a bajillion records and tour the world 5 times over. It was something that I felt really proud of, and I'm still proud to this day, to be able to have, like, for instance, my merch. A lot of people ask me all the time, what is that little astronaut boy holding balloons, made out of planets? Like, why is that your logo? Like, and I tell them, a lot of artists in my position try to make their name like their logo, like their brand. And I did that for so many years, and I always felt weird, doing that. It's kind of like, hey, look at me. As if they didn't already know. They're at your show, dude. But the message of the Cosmo Boy, which is what we call him, was something that my daughter had drew up. She's an incredible artist. My daughter Brooklyn, my oldest, she's 9 years old. She's an incredible artist, so young. And so I had her kind of mess around with drawing different cartoon characters that we could use as kind of like a mascot. And she came up with this astronaut boy that was holding balloons made out of planets. And she, made one eye a cross and one eye an X. And she's like, Dad, it's kind of like you, a little good, a little bad. And you're always kind of a little bit out of this world. You're a little crazy. So you're kind of like an astronaut. And so I was like, dude, I love it. Like, and the balloons kind of represented kind of just like ascending, like holding on to your dreams, like something magical and ascending. And so I thought it was really deep for a 9-year-old to break down, and immediately fell in love with it. And so we ran it. And one of the things we've been doing for the last couple of years now, we've been really, really blessed to be able to take a percentage of the merchandise that we sell, whether it's online or at shows, and we buy instruments and give them back to underfunded schools here in Davidson County and down in Florida in the Panhandle. And we've been able to give away about half a dozen guitars just this year, via that. And yeah, we're extremely proud of that. And again, it goes back to kind of, had I not started off kind of making it just more than me, I don't think it would have worked that way. So I'm glad. I think the old saying, not everything goes how it's supposed, or not everything goes how we want it to, but everything works out how it's supposed to.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, so much inspiration. The concept of your album is fantastic, and the name just is incredible. Chase Your Purpose. I
Yes.
like shout out to you for having a cool name you can do that with. And it fits so well. So, just a little bit, talk about the writing process for this. Just like, what is your songwriting process in general when you're writing songs? And then choosing the track list as well. How did you do that selection process?
Well, so the writing process, and I mean, I'm a student to this game. I try to learn something every day, and I've been really, really, really blessed to be working with Danny Rader. Danny, he's 3-time ACM award winner, musician of the year. He was Keith Urban's utility guitar player for over 15 years. He's currently in Kenny Chesney's touring band. He's the producer and music director for the most recent CMA Awards. He's probably one of the most prestigious dudes that someone could try to work with. And again, it's one of those situations where I'm like, why in the world would this dude want to work with me? Kind of like Tony. But so yeah, when Danny and I kind of take on the task of writing stuff, he gives me a little bit of freedom. He'll be like, hey man, go work on some ideas. get them together as best as you can. And a lot of times it's just me and a guitar and like a voice memo. And then I'll start whittling away. I'll get something, 30, 40, 50% of the way kind of conceptualized. And then I'll take a big old list of songs and ideas like that. And he'll comb through them and be like, this one's not that good. This one's cool. This one's really good. Okay, let's take these ones. And then we'll focus for a few days in the studio. And Danny will start helping me with melody. He'll start, critiquing different lyrical revisions. He'll start lobbing in suggestions. And then after we kind of really tighten down what we think the song's going to be, we'll start producing a whole track around it. And that's pretty much been the blueprint. And it's kind of one of those things. If it ain't broke, don't try to fix it, because we are able to knock out a lot of songs very quickly that way. I mean, we've probably got probably close to like 20 some songs within 6 months that we did. He's been super busy the last 6 months, touring with Kenny Chesney and with everything with the CMA Awards. But we're going back in this December and working on some new music. We feel like we've got the album pretty much done, but it's kind of one of those things. It's you keep doing it and you keep lobbing in songs, because until you've got that set release date and you got to turn in masters, it doesn't hurt to keep being creative and keep adding to it.
I love that so much. I really like how you said you had a whole list of ideas and then it was like, okay, let's look through and see which ones are the best. That's such a good process. And I do that a lot. I really write solo a lot, but I do quite a lot of co-writing for other artists. But like when I'm writing my own stuff, it's like I need to be critical of my own work. Like, yeah, that concept's cool, but this song's better, and I think being critical and being able to analyze your own work like that is so important, because there are some writers who get so attached to every single idea and can't let things go and can't recognize the good songs. And I've always said you need to get out songs that aren't that great in order to get to the good ones. And so you were able to go through that with Danny and work in the studio and find the songs that fit the project, which was amazing. And I also love how you said that you're working on new music. Like, I'm always writing, I'm always recording, and I think and allowing yourself to continue to stay creative and not cut yourself off and say, okay, these are the songs, until it comes to the point where you really need to decide and turn it in. Like, you can always, write one more song that happens to be like the gem of the project. Like, you never know. So continuing to write and create is so, so important. And I can't wait to hear the entire album, because Backroad is fantastic. So I can only imagine what the rest of it is like.
Thank you. Our next single that we will drop, because we will be dropping another single this spring, is called Strawberry Daiquiris.
Ooh,
And it's a nice little nostalgic
cool
spring break lovers song. I'll have to send you a little sneak peek of it for you to listen to.
Oh, I love the title, Strawberry Daiquiri.
Oh yeah, it's a vibe. It really is. We're really, really proud of it.
So from the whole process of creating this project and getting to work with Danny and seeing your art come to life in such an amazing way, what do you think your biggest takeaway has been?
Man, the biggest takeaway for me is sometimes you have this vision for yourself and you hold on so tightly to it that that you get in your own way. Sometimes you literally just have to be willing to just enjoy the journey and not necessarily the destination. And as cliche as that is, it's super true, because I could have never told myself a few years ago, let alone 20 years ago, that I would be working today with who I'm working with, and just how proud I am of that, because I couldn't have designed that. Only God could have. I mean, how I met Danny essentially was I was opening for Jason Aldean back in, I want to say it was like 2007. It's a while ago. One of the biggest shows I had done at the time. It was when Jason was celebrating his first or second number one. I think it was his number one with Hicktown or number one with Y. And it was a hometown show in Macon. And Danny was at the time in Jason Aldean's band. And I had basically, as the 16-year-old, 15, 16-year-old kid that was just, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, opening up for Jason, managed to make a little bit of a connection with Danny back then, and then just didn't know that 15 years later, we would wind up in a studio session again here in town. And it was during COVID, had first struck. So everyone was all masked up. And all we could kind of see is each other's like eyes, like everyone's kind of just eyeballs. But we both kind of were like, wait a second. And then he heard my name because it was a session for me. I was working with an incredibly talented songwriter and producer, Joe West. He wrote Without You for Keith Urban. huge number one for him. So shout out to Joe for getting Danny and I back in a room. But basically it was all those years later in kind of just like the plan that God clearly had for me, not myself. So I think, you just have to be willing to be a student of the game and trust the journey and keep the faith, and all will work out how it's supposed to. I firmly believe that.
That's perfect, beautiful. Yes, trust the journey and chase your purpose, right?
Exactly. You got to chase your purpose. There's a lot of people ask themselves all the time, and they do it on a daily basis. I feel like I know I do, or at least was, and that is, am I happy? And am I living my life's purpose? And if you can wake up and answer those things with yes, then you are successful. So definitely always be trying to chase your purpose. It won't lead you astray.
Perfect. Well, Chase, it was an absolute honor having you on the show. It was lovely chatting with you. You're so inspiring, and I'm so honored we got this opportunity to talk. And before you go, please share with the listeners where they can find you online and listen to your music.
So if you go to, as far as websites go, you can go to chasemitchell.com, or you can go to chasemusic.com. Music is spelled though MUSIK, so chasemusik.com. All the socials are at Chase Music, same thing, at Chase MUSIK.
Fabulous. Thank you so much again, Chase, for joining me. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this incredible episode with Chase Mitchell. And of course, until next time, stay right on track.